Daith da, Ewi Nakan. Welcome to podcast number 77. Well, I'm cutting it fine tonight. I tell you, 'tis Friday evening, 'tis coming up to 9 o'clock, and 'twas touch and go if I was going to make it the deadline for doing the podcast, but I'm here and I'm now almost on schedule. Looking back over the last week, we had the Coasters meeting at work on last Friday. Brilliant to meet up with all the old gang again. Really good. And then Saturday, I did my training run. And then I'm just looking, 16 miles I had to run. And I tell you what, 'twas hard going. 'Twas blimmin' cold. 'Twas pouring down with rain. I'm getting chilblains on me fingers now where I'm running in the cold. And 'twas a long old slog. And I've had the 3 runs again this week. I do 5 miles. It should be every other night sort of job. But because I've had a busy end to the week in evenings, I had to squeeze them in at the beginning. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I did 5 miles each because I was out last night and I've been out tonight. But the way I'm feeling at the minute, I tell you, this could be the last marathon. I know I've said it before, but I just seem to be running out of time. And the running ain't getting any easier, I tell you. But anyway, I did the run and all was well. And I did that on the Saturday because on the Sunday in the morning, Maben was meant to be playing football. But again, 3rd week running, game called off because the pitch is waterlogged. The amount of rain we've had here in North Cornwall, 'tis crazy. But it wasn't bad weather actually. And in the afternoon, I went down to Perranporth. I know I did talk about this again before last year. It's the start of the Perrantide, as we call it. On the Saturday, I think it all kicked off down Redruth. And then always on the Sunday closest to St. Piran's Day, which is March the 5th, we have a parade, a march across the sand dunes at Perranporth. And we go to the old oratory there, St. Piran's Old Church, and end up at the St. Piran's Celtic Cross. And 'tis a fantastic event. Usually 'tis cold and windy and wet, but the weather was handsome. And my old mate Martin Langdon was there and Linda and lots of other familiar faces. I had a nice yarn with Dick Cole, leader of Mebby and Kernow, which we'll talk about a bit later in the programme. Colin Retallick was there as well. I had a quick yarn with E. Brilliant day. Look forward to it every year. But I won't go into St. Piran too much today because I did mention it 12 months ago. So if you don't know much about it, you can troll back through the podcasts and I do talk about it on a previous episode. And then after that beautiful weather, back to work on the Monday and it hammered it. 'Twas pouring down. And we had a very big funeral in Bodmin Church. And I tell you what, I looked out in the porch just before the service started, and I've never before seen so many discarded umbrellas in the porch. Well, I wouldn't say there was hundreds, but there was a hang of a lot. The rain was terrible, absolutely terrible. Apart from that, all the funerals this week have gone well. We did have a little bit of a slight panic when we came into work early one morning for one of our direct unattended of funerals. Phil came in and he thought something looking funny there with ours, went round to the front and we had a flat tire and must have got a nail or something in it. So luckily we got the 2 hearses, so it was just a case of swapping the hearses around, getting ourselves sorted, and then off they went. So quite often I do work in the evenings and work on me podcasts and everything. But this week, like I say, I was a bit under pressure. I knew I was out Thursday and I'm out tonight. So I had to do me runs Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like I said. And then Thursday, last night, I was up St. Teth, which is Bill Pearce, who we're speaking to directly, Bill Pearce's home village, St. Teth. And I was up there because it was the licensing of the new vicar up there, Nicola Farr. And of course, she covers the cluster. 'Tis like Camel Allen benefice. So 'tis Advent, Camelford, Llanteglis by Camelford, St. Teth, Delabole. So she covers all those churches. And the Bishop of St. Germans was there, and the Archdeacon of Bodmin. Hang of a crowd. The church was absolutely packed. So I got in the church, saw the church warden. I said, here, I'll slip in the back here now. He said, oh, no. He said, there's a place reserved for you over on the left there near the front. I thought, oh, all right then. So I went over, sat down, little pew. You could only get 3 people in. And then this man and lady come and sat next to me. I didn't know him at all. And then our friend Churston came around, whose friend's a mutual friend of us. So she introduced us, so that was good. So 'tis about 5 minutes to go now before the service starts. So the lady turned to me and said, oh, are you speaking in the service tonight? I said, no. She said, oh, I am. And then she had a list and she looked down and she said, oh, yeah, you are speaking. Down here, look. Well, that was a bit of a shock to the system, I tell you. What 'tis, when you get a new vicar there, I'd say 2/3 of the way through the service, they will then ask a few people from the community to come up and just welcome them to the area. And I've done it before, but I've been warned before that I was going to speak. And you kind of go up, and normally what happens is that you're talking to the vicar, but you're talking loud enough that the whole church can hear what you're saying. And I'm thinking, hang, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? So the service starts, so I'm going over my mind, right, what am I going to say? I practice it. Can't get me words mixed up. Practice it kind of thing. So it's going through my mind, and then it gets to the point where we have to go up. So we go up one at a time. I'm the last one to go up. So the first person goes up and speaks to Nikki, the new vicar, but they don't speak out loud. They just speak quietly to her, and whatever they said, welcome to the area or something. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Well, then the second one went up and they spoke quietly, and the third. And I thought, we min here. We min. So when it was my turn to go up, I went up and I just had a quiet, short conversation with her, and it was proper. I tell you, it was proper. But I was worried there for a bit. But it was a lovely service, absolutely lovely. And I went over to the hall afterwards and mingled a bit, and then I come home. So that was last night. And tonight, I've just come home from Port Isaac, because my dear mate, Lorraine Ward, she's just had the official opening tonight of her fine art gallery. And what a fantastic position 'tis. Like, as you're going into Port Isaac, 'tis on New Road. So it's at the top of the village, sitting actually down in the village. But like in the summer, it gets so busy that all your holiday makers, then kind of walking down the road past it. So I think she's got a lot of passing trade, a lovely location really to catch people then walking by as they go down to the village. But I had a brilliant evening there, saw a few old mates and that, had a good old yarn, and I'm sure she'll do well. So now we go over to the second part of my interview with Bill, dear Bill Pearce. And towards the end, he does say how he's had glad times and sad times. And in this part of the interview, he does talk about both. So I'll hand over now to Bill, and then I'll speak to you directly. So here it is.
When he was 65, Dad retired, and we were worrying how he would cope with retirement. He was a workaholic. He had a garden best part of an acre, which he turned with a fork. But we needn't have worried, because 3 months after retirement, he passed away from his stroke that I mentioned earlier. That left Mum alone at Illas in 1978, again with cancer. She passed to our peace and left Illas to me and Merv, and we had a decision to make. Neither of us wanted the property to go out of the family. It'd been ours. Pearce was there for generations.
Yeah.
So the outcome was that I paid Merv his share. My family moved in.
Yeah.
But before we could, there was major structural alterations to make. Dad would have turned in his grave as we pulled down his garage and his pig's houses to build a kitchen, and turned his massive vegetable garden into a lawn with a putting green, and brought mains water to the house, dug a cesspit big enough to park 2 minis in, built a new study, bought 2 fields nearby. Life couldn't have been sweeter. The boys had their Shetland ponies, Evie had her horse. The boys went to the same school I went to, and we'd created a property that would eventually pass to the boys and their offspring, or so we thought. But nobody could anticipate the devastation which lurked around the corner. In 1984, Rob was poorly.
Right.
And the family doctor at the time diagnosed glandular fever. Well, weeks later, he wasn't responding to treatment. We weren't happy, and we demanded a second opinion. He was sent for consultation to Freedom Fields Hospital in those days. And after tests, we waited for hours as afternoon drifted into evening to know the outcome. 8 o'clock or thereabouts, we were summoned to this room to hear the findings from a paediatric consultant. We sensed unease because all of a sudden the room started filling up with doctors and nurses, and then we could not believe what we were being told. Rob was seriously ill with leukemia, and at that precise moment he was dying, and the fight to save him had to start straight away. He had a very virulent form of leukemia which didn't respond to treatment, and on his 11th birthday he was admitted to the Royal Free Hospital in North London, where advanced research was ongoing. It was decided that a bone marrow transplant was urgently required. There was no match on the register, so Evie, Paul and me were tested. There were 5 essential components that we had to match on. The nearest to that was Paul, who matched on 3. And in desperation, it was decided for him to donate his bone marrow, which the dear boy did, but he was only 7 at the time, and it didn't work. And would you believe, all these years later, it still affected him, because he cannot get it out of his mind that he let his brother down. But major decisions had to be made. Clearly, Evie would stay with Rob in London. I had to go back to work to preserve my job. Paul, heartbreakingly really, but forever grateful, went to Taunton to live with brother Merv and his family. But then the days became weeks, and the weeks became months, with Rob making no apparent progress. But we just simply had to believe. But that belief was undermined on a date. My memory's bad these days, but there are dates that's engraved on your soul. And that was the Sunday, the 20th of October, 85. Rob and Evie had little to do in this isolation ward other than to watch television, and for no other reason other than to pass the time this Sunday night. They were watching a programme of hymn singing on TV, Sunday half hour. During the singing of the hymn, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind, Evie was to hear a quiet voice telling her Rob was wanted in another place and wouldn't get over his leukemia. She had to hold herself together, obviously, for Rob, but she was distraught and rang me up that night. I headed for London the next day, but sadly, the voice was right, and He passed away on the 17th of December. We brought him home to Illes to rest in my study. We took the lid off his coffin, and before we took him to Davidstow on Christmas Eve for burial, next to the granddad who loved him. That was a bitter blow.
Yeah.
After he died, we tried to resume living at Illes, but it didn't work.
No.
The memories were everywhere. His room we couldn't touch. And our number one consideration now had to be Paul, after what he'd been through. So we decided to sell Illes and we moved to a property on the banks of the Tamar at Cargreen. With benefit of hindsight, wasn't the cleverest move. We lost tens of thousands of pounds on Illes, but that was only money. Nothing could compensate for the loss that we'd had. We initially set up a charity called Sick Children in Crisis to raise money for Devon and Cornwall's very sick children, but it was too near and too raw, and the medics said we must drop it. But we urgently sought a purpose in our lives. In 1985, Cornwall introduced the first air ambulance in the country, which was to be funded by the people of Cornwall.
Yeah.
The initial interest was overwhelming, but then as the months went by, it tapered off a little, and suddenly we thought about the air ambulance. It was all about the saving of life when we'd had this horrendous tragedy. And so in 1988, I approached them. They were interested, and they engaged me for 3 years to run a county lottery,
Right.
a weekly lottery. They took me on for 3 years. I actually stayed 26.
Get away.
But I went the same formula that I used at Argyll.
Yeah.
We had an army of agents in every village and town in the county. We went around every week collecting the money. Over the years, we did make millions of pounds.
Yeah.
I've lived my life in the belief that good must somehow triumph over adversity. So the good that came out of that was that we played a part in keeping the air ambulance.
Yeah.
That's really the story of my life in some ways. But I've always been a Cornish nationalist. For the past 54 years, I've been a paid-up member of Medbey Carnell. Only vote MK. And as there's rarely a MK candidate in my constituency, I rarely vote. A proud Cornishman, not English. Cornwall is a country and not a county. I grieve at the desecration of its industries in my lifetime, the fishing industry, the tin mining. And locally, you've got Delabo Slate Quarry closed, and 4 miles away, you've got slates being sold, imported from Brazil, which I find obnoxious. But my biggest gripe, I must be careful how I say this, but are the second homeowners, who, because of their affluence, can buy up properties that come on the market, reside there when they choose, as I understand, rent out when not resident. And our kids haven't got a chance of getting on the property ladder. I remember as a boy going down to Padstow on a winter's night, and you would see lights in the windows all the way around the harbour. Now it's darkness. The charity shelter did an estimate of 2022, and they claimed there were 1,670 in the county who were homeless, 744 of whom were kids. Action on empty homes estimated there were 13,292 second homes in Cornwall, the largest in any local authority, and the same organisation estimated there were 2,581 LTEHs. These are properties which have been empty for more than 6 months. I find hard to comprehend. But I always remember what dear old Merv said to me. He always reminded me it was the Cornish that sold them to them. I've lived too long. I've seen too much change. They talk about the bad old times. I can't help thinking they were the good times. I've had a go recently with my teeth. Right. And I had to have 3 teeth out. And I tried National Health. Not a chance. And you haven't got a lot of choice when you've got nagging pain in your jaw. And I went privately, over £500 to have 3 teeth out. £140 for a filling. And I've got bare gums at the bottom and a full set of dentures, no change out of £3,000. And you see, Dave, you've got a generation of kids growing up now that will never see a dentist. No. Or most of them won't. And yet when I was a boy at St. Tess School, they called them the bad old days, a school dentist came around and sewed the kids' teeth every year. But I suppose that's what they call progress. I don't know. A big love of me life at the moment. I'm so limited in what I can do, but is Davidstow Church. Very important to me. Rob's buried there. Over 20 members and distant members of my family. I've served on the PCC there. I regularly go there. There again, you see. When I was a boy, it had its own vicar with 3 services a Sunday. Long since gone. Today, the vicarage is the Pendragon Hotel. 18 months ago, we were having one service every Sunday there. And then, unthinkable in my day, we went into cooperation with a nearby Methodist Bethel Chapel. Now, that would have been unheard of in my day. When we go back to the post-war years and Armistice Sunday at St. Teth, the chapel would line up one side of the square and the Church of England the other. It was a bit like Catholics and Protestants in recent years. And the thoughts of Methodists and the Church of England coming together, I could never understand why, because there's only one God. But the cooperation is working wonderfully well. Obviously, you wish it wouldn't, because you wish you had your own services every Sunday. Yeah. But we now have alternate services, 1st and 3rd at Davidstow, 2nd and 4th at Bethel. Because, we were down. The church seats 200. And if we had 10 there on a Sunday, you'd be tempted to call the police for crowd control. But another personal consideration, when Rob died, the family put a stained glass window which looks out over his grave, and the priest that took his funeral, David Nash, rang me up one day and said, "Worrying news, Bill. The diocese are thinking of closing Davidstow Church. What about Rob's window?" Well, you can't do nothing with an 8-foot window, No. And I was horrified. I thought what I would do is produce a parish magazine and sell advertising space in it. Mm-hmm. So I contacted the powers that be at Truro and asked for a 3-month stay of execution, which they granted. And within 3 months, I'd launched this magazine, and that brings in over £3,000 a year from advertising, which keeps the wolf from the door. Yeah. I suppose I summed my life up. My doctor at Saltash once said to me, "You're 2 holics, Bill." He said, "You're a foodaholic and a workaholic." But for me, work has always been a privilege. I spent 60 years in the workplace. I feel sorry for those who do a job just for a weekly pay packet at the end of the week. When I reached the age of 80, I was offered another renewal. But Merv, as you know, was losing his fight with prostate cancer at the time. And so I decided to retire. I had belief in myself. I'd made a success of 3 different careers. Along the way, I suppose it's true to say I had glad times and sad times, successes and failures, highs and lows. I often think of the words of that wonderful classic Frank Sinatra. At the end of the day, I did it my way. Now as I approach me 90th in August, I've known better times. You don't judge a parcel by its wrapper. I've got major health issues, which physically bar me from doing very much. And I know I'm not the only one to lose my wife, but losing Evie after 47 years was a terrible blow. And I still struggle. I find the silence can be deafening. At 80 years, I'm often, in some ways, starting to teach myself new activities. She would never let me near the kitchen, which I was very happy to accommodate for 47 years.
Yeah.
Of course, when she went, I was lost.
Yeah.
And if you offered me £1,000, I wouldn't know how to switch the damned oven on. I worked out the washing machine, but I didn't realise if you put my black sweater in with my white vest, that my vest would end up grey. But I overcame the cooking. I bought one of these marvellous air fryers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he was expensive. I bought a 2-chamber one.
Right.
And then if you wanted to do steak and chips, if one took 20 minutes, you could set him going.
Yeah.
And then when he gets down to 10 minutes, start them both going, and it all ends up ready together. So that one in a microwave, and I can get by. I'd had these teeth out, and I could only eat soft stuff. So I love veg. So I thought to myself, why not make a stew? Yeah. Vegetable stew. So I went to Tesco and got packets of veg mix, some minced beef. Come home, well, I worked out, putting rocket science. So I put the veg in I cooked the mince first of all, because I thought that would take longer. Then I cooked the veg, but I must have thick gravy. I had a new pot of Bisto, so I put in some Bisto, 2 tablespoons. Well, that didn't seem to work. So I put a couple more, and that didn't work. And would you believe, in the end, I chucked the entire can in.
Right.
Of Bisto. Let it simmer. Well, I come out 20 minutes or so later, and I'm telling you, it was that thick it bent the handle of my plastic spoon. In fact, I stuck the spoon upright in the middle, and he stood upright. The gravy was that thick you could chew it. And so I shan't make that mistake again. Dave, I want to, and I hope you don't object, I want to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge what a wonderful funeral organisation you had. I will never forget the morning after Evie died, when you came to take her away, and I now understand, having diplomatically spoken to my son, you engaged me in conversation in a back lounge whilst your staff took her from her bed, and I didn't have to witness that, and I shall ever be grateful. And I've got to say, your care and concern didn't stop at the funeral. I'm not strong enough in this rabbit-hutch of a bungalow to ever home here. You've regularly allowed me to come down to Whitebridge, you and those wonderful girls that you've got there, to spend a few precious minutes with her. And our Cassie is waiting for me in your chapel on anniversaries. I shall be down next Monday with your permission, and that means so much. And I know you've got my arrangements, cometh the day. I want a traditional Church of England service at Davidstow, followed by a Cornish celebration at Glyn Valley. And you've assured me that I will be wearing my full Cornish regalia, kilt, spur and the lot.
Yeah.
And then my ashes will be put with Evie's, and the casket buried in Rob's grave.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got a lot more to say than that, Dave. I hope it meets your
it was fantastic.
Expectations.
Definitely.
But it's been a privilege to have the opportunity.
Lovely. No, thank you for letting me come up, Bill. And I think, would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
Yes, to all listeners, I would say I wish you well. And if any of you've ever got 5 minutes to have a chat, feel free to do so, because it's the long hours of silence that get me.
Yeah.
All right, Dave?
Proper job. Well, thank you again.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Well, thank you, Bill. Like I said earlier, glad times and sad times. And I think that Bill definitely brought that home today. It did strike a bit of a chord with me, really, because me nan and grandpa, they had me father. And then there was a gap of quite a few years. Father was in his, mid-teens, early teens, I suppose, when father's brother was born, John Bray. Little John, they used to call him in the family. And sadly, he died when he was just 4.5 from leukemia. And so I can imagine what Nan and Grampy must have gone through. But thank you very much, Bill. I think for me Cornish dialect of the week, I don't really know if 'tis Cornish or no. It could be said all over the world, as far as I know. But 'tis a saying that I hear quite a bit down here. And Bill actually said it in his interview last week. And when I asked him how he was, he said, "I'm the right side of the grass," meaning that he's still alive and that he hasn't passed away and obviously been buried. So, yep, on the right side of the grass. So I thought that would be me saying for this week. Me Cornish word, I thought I would do Mebian Kerno. That's the political party that Bill was talking about. For any of you that are outside Cornwall, it's the Party of Cornwall, they call it. And Mebian Kerno, translated, means Sons of Cornwall. Sons of Cornwall, Mebian Kerno. And like I said, it all kind of ties in, really, because I only met up with Dick Cole there. He's the leader when we was down Perranporth last week. And like also with being back St. Teth last night. It all ties in with Bill again. So it's got a nice symmetry to it. Not planned at all, but it's got a nice symmetry. Not cemetery, symmetry. Right, well, I think that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about now. I've gone on a bit longer tonight. Sorry about that. I hope you have a good week. Think of me tomorrow. I'll be out doing me 17 miles, trudging up the camel trail up towards St. Breward and back. But I'll speak to you again next week. So, wish ye well, do Guinness, Kerno Bisfican.